All right, Senator Paul.
Hey.
Welcome to the Subway Series.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Good. This means I won't get lost in the tunnel. I'm on the subway. I'm pointing in the right direction.
The tracks.
Right.
You won't go off the rails.
Right.
Speaking of going off the rails, you have come out with $500 billion in spending cuts for this year. We've just heard from Paul Ryan. They're going with $58 billion in non-security spending cuts.
Well, this is the whole paradox or problem here. The Senate Republicans and the House Republicans are probably 100% behind a balanced budget amendment. My question is, where's the money going to come from? Where are you going to cut?
Do it, right?
I'm for it too, but I'm willing to say we will cut these things. The $500 billion that I proposed is a third of 1 year's problem. I go to a Tea Party, and you know what they say to me? It's not enough. It's not enough. Where's the other Where's the other trillion you need? The people are ready to hear from that, but it won't be easy. But we would have to have a different understanding of what the federal government does. It would be much different because we would have to go back to thinking that states and locality and individuals would do more and government would do a lot less.
Okay, but this is amazing because here you have Paul Ryan, and he's no big spending Democrat. I mean, he's a fiscal hawk, and he comes out with just $58 billion in cuts for this year. You are almost 10 times that much.
I think they fear that the American people won't accept it. And you've seen, I mean, there has been I've gotten some feedback that hasn't all been positive. And for example, you know, it's $500 billion, but people have been attacking me for $3 billion out of it. You know, that's 3/5 of 1%. So people, when it's their program, they get very concerned. But my point is, it's not about the value of your particular program. It's about the consequences of continuing to borrow that money from China, continuing to print that money at the Federal Reserve, or basically monetize our debt, and the danger that ultimately the debt is towards our economy. I don't want that chaos to come to our country, and I know people want government spending and they want things, but the alternative is maybe a catastrophe if we can't pay for our debt.
You've been hammered for suggesting cutting foreign aid, including aid to Israel, which has really been something that's been sacrosanct up here.
Right.
Is that truly your position?
Well, the interesting thing is that I didn't single out Israel. I said all foreign aid. And the interesting thing, if you look at the last 10 years worth of foreign aid, Israel gets just slightly more than Jordan and Egypt get together. So really we're funding kind of both sides of races. We sell arms to Saudi Arabia as well. We really, during the Iran-Iraq war from 1980 to 1988, there were F-14s on both sides. You know, we're bombing each other with planes that we paid for on both sides because we got them for the Shah, and then we were supporting Saddam Hussein at the time. I don't think that's a good idea, particularly when we have to borrow the money from China to pay for the weapons. So I really think that you have to look at every area, and I'm not singling out Israel. I'm a supporter of Israel. I want to be known as a friend of Israel. But we can't,
not with foreign aid.
Well, you can't give money you don't have. We can't just borrow from our kids' future and give it to countries, even if they are our friends. Some people interpret this to mean, oh, you're not a friend of Israel. No, I want to be a friend of Israel. I think they're an important ally. But I also think that their per capita income is greater than probably 3/4 of the rest of the world. Should we be giving money to a free money or welfare to a rich nation? I don't think so.
You think they can handle their own defense?
I think they're probably 10 years ahead of any neighboring country. I think their defense is very significant, and I think probably well in advance of any of their potential enemies.
Would you leave any foreign aid intact?
No.
None?
No. I just don't think you can give other people's money away when we don't have enough. I mean, we can't rebuild bridges in our country. If you do a poll, the other day Reuters did a poll, and they said, here's 10 different items, would you be willing to cut? It's like 72% of the American people said cut foreign aid. They don't understand it. It's also a little inconsistent with the Republican philosophy. If you're out of work, we have sympathy with you as a Republican, but we want the economy to get going and you get back to work. But we don't want to coddle you for 4 years. Well, same with a foreign country, I think. Should we coddle a country for 30 years or 40 years? They have to begin to become self-sufficient. Self-sufficiency and independence are Republican philosophies. They should be the same domestically as they are internationally.
What about Afghanistan? I mean, we're spending about $5 billion a month in Afghanistan.
I think nation building is something we shouldn't be involved in. You know, George Bush said when he ran in 2000 that we should be a humble nation and that we really shouldn't be involved in nation building.
But nation building is exactly what we're doing in Afghanistan, isn't it?
I think we're trying, you know, but I mean, I don't think it makes sense to continue to spend hundreds of billions of dollars. I think our national defense should be about preventing terrorists from attacking us. So I did agree with, you know, the initial reason why we went into Afghanistan. I would have voted for that.
Right. But right now, would you still have 100,000 plus troops on the ground?
I think ultimately troop deployment is decided by the president. So I don't think Congress can constitutionally tell him which way or not. You know, if I were an individual running for president and that was something that a presidential candidate would say, I would say that we need to be safe, but we need to determine whether we need 100,000 troops to take care of 100 al-Qaeda fighters. That's what they're saying. Yeah. Even General Jones said less than 100 al-Qaeda. So I think you need to assess the risk. I personally think that you could probably have a much smaller presence, have a base there to stabilize it for a couple years, patrol no streets, have the Afghans. 10 years is a long time for them not to be stepping up and patrolling their streets.
Yeah, and that certainly doesn't sound like counterinsurgency like Petraeus has been taught. I mean,
yeah, no, I think that ultimately they could hide in the mountains for 100 years. Yeah. They know we'll go whether there's a timeline or not. They know eventually they'll get it back, but I don't see the end result being good.
Okay, you mentioned if you were a candidate for president. Now, your father has been known to run for president from time to time.
Right.
Are we ever going to see Rand Paul run for president?
Well, I've only been here a month.
Okay,
so
all right.
Come back and ask me in a few months. So, you know, we'll see. I mean, I'm very much interested in trying to shape the debate. And I think already, only being here a few weeks, I may not win the battles, but people are talking about what we're proposing. And we plan on trying to shake things up. And really my goal is to try to find solutions before there's chaos. And I think there could be chaos if we can't pay for our debt. And I'm afraid that could come in the near future.
And you must also get a sense of how slow things actually move around here. I mean, you still don't have your office yet, right? I mean, you're still in the basement somewhere in temporary space.
Right. Well, one of the things
you just got your committee assignment.
One of the things I like to quote also from Henry Clay, who's from Kentucky, was he was in the Senate first, and he was actually 29, just like Joe Biden. He was 29 when he got here, and it was so slow, it was like molasses to him. He quit, went home, and ran for the House because he wanted to be in the more active body. And then, interestingly, he became the Speaker of the House in his first term.
Yeah.
So I'm all for trying to move forward. I don't see myself being here 30 or 40 years to try to change the system through seniority. I think that's part of the problem we have is the people trying to get higher and higher up the food chain so they can bring home goodies to their state. Yeah. I think we need to talk more about what our nation's problems are instead of if I get it in Kentucky, Ohio doesn't get it. You know, and if I don't get it in Kentucky, Ohio will get it.
But it's not inconceivable that someday you would run for president to get that. I mean, I know you've only been here a month. I know you can't declare it right now.
Yeah, I'm not willing to go as far as Sherman said, you know, if nominated, I will not run. If nominated, I will run.
Okay, all right, we've got that. You mentioned Henry Clay. Henry Clay is a god around here, considered
more
one of
statues
the greatest,
than anybody else, I think.
And statues on the House and the Senate side. Speaker of the House, considered one of the greatest senators. A god in the state of Kentucky. You deliver your first speech, and you criticize Henry Clay.
Well, I did, but you know, the interesting thing is I decided that there was another Kentuckian I liked even more, who was Cassius Clay, who was a great abolitionist, who didn't compromise his principles.
We're not talking about the boxer here.
Right. We're talking about who the boxer I think was named after. Yeah. They have exactly the same name, so I'm assuming he was named after him. But he was a great abolitionist. He didn't compromise his principles. And I think there's certain things, like slavery, where you shouldn't have compromised. So I think Henry Clay's compromise of extending slavery to Arkansas and then not to Nebraska, to Kansas and not Nebraska, it wasn't a good compromise because eventually it did lead to war.
So Henry Clay's known as the Great Compromiser. What will Rand Paul be known as? If he can have a real impact on this place, what will you be known as?
I am fascinated and enthralled by great heroes, people who are true believers. And true believers don't occur in politics very often. Most people who get here, who get to the U.S. Senate, have been through many, many races and many, many offices and many, many compromises to get here. I never ran for anything, and I ran for one office, but I ran on what I believed in and didn't say I'd come up here to compromise. I said I'd come up here to cut federal spending, to balance the budget, and to make government a constitutional body again. And I was elected by that. And I've always said I'm not afraid to be unelected, so I think I'll stick by that and try to stand for what I believe in. But I think true belief is underrated. So I think you can be true to your beliefs, be principled, and win elections. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
So your label then would be Rand Paul, true believer.
I wouldn't mind that if that were written on my headstone, but I hope it's a few years till it's written on my headstone. But yeah, I think it is important to believe in something.
Now, some of your cuts, in addition to foreign aid, are incredibly deep cuts. I mean, education, you would cut the education budget by, 80-some percent. 83% cut to education.
The main reason is that I think education should be handled by the states and the localities and not by the federal government. That really was a very mainstream Republican position for many years. Ronald Reagan ran on it in 1980. It was part of our platform. Even up when Dole was running in 96, Dole was still for elimination of the Department of Education. But we got lost somewhere along the way. When we elected George W. Bush, the Republicans all of a sudden decided, not only are we not for eliminating the Department of Education, we're for doubling it. So they passed No Child Left Behind, which nobody likes. Old-fashioned conservatives like myself don't like it. The teachers union doesn't like it. I've yet to meet a teacher, principal, or superintendent who likes No Child Left Behind. But that doubled the size of the Department of Education, doubled the amount of regulations, and brought control to Washington. And I want to devolve that power back to the states.
But overall, I mean, these cuts, 83% cut in education, reducing the Pentagon's budget by $16 billion in a single year, doing away with the Housing and Urban Development Department, doing away with the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
I think ultimately the overall compromise, and my speech the other day was about compromise. Will I be a great compromiser? There has to be compromise to get agreement. But the compromise needs to be about conservatives admitting that we can cut some from military and liberals admitting that we can cut some from domestic welfare spending, from domestic spending. But see, it is the devil's in the detail on this. The president says the other day he's going to freeze domestic spending, discretionary spending. But it's 12% of the budget, and he's freezing it after increasing it by 25%, from 2008.
But as far
so
as
it does nothing.
No compromise on the issue of tax increases.
No, the reason
is that one of those bottom line? Absolutely not.
Yeah, and the main reason is that taxes and government, if you look at it from government spending, we're now spending 25% of our GDP, the highest rate ever. We've never spent this much in Washington. I think if you raise taxes, you're justifying 25% of our economy being spent up here, and really we need to make it much smaller. It used to be 20% or 18% only a few years ago. When it was 20%, we balanced our budget, actually. We got very close, in the latter part of the 90s. When we had divided government, we actually did a little better than when we had unified government.
Okay, so the Tea Party caucus wasn't exactly a great turnout on the Senate side. You had Senator Lee, Senator DeMint.
Depends on how you define it. See, the Tea Party caucus isn't just senators.
Yeah.
It's grassroots activists, too.
But why not more senators? Why don't are they not getting the message?
I think some don't know exactly what our plan was. I tried to convey what our plan would be, and they'll learn more about it over time. I think they're envisioning that somehow that it's a closed room smoking cigars, and then all of a sudden we're co-opting the Tea Party. I know about the Tea Party. I come from the Tea Party, and I know they don't like that. And so we purposely set our first meeting up as a town hall. We invited Tea Parties from all over. We invited 8 different Tea Party leaders from groups that really, I think, represent all the major national Tea Party groups.
What affiliation is more important to you, Tea Party or Republican Party?
I think it's always, there are problems in our nation's capital that are more important than party affiliation. And I will always believe that. It's not necessarily Tea Party versus Republican Party. I would say that if you ask me what's more important, tackling our nation's deficit, our nation's debt problems, or being a Republican, I would say tackling the debt.
And just so I have the point for, I mean, it seems obvious that what the Republicans have put out now today, $58 billion in cuts in this year's budget in non-security spending is simply not enough.
No, it's really not going to touch the problem. Within 6 months to 9 months, they will come back and raise the debt ceiling again. Unless they have $58 billion in cuts but raise it $1 trillion, the debt ceiling, they'll be back having the same problem in 6 months. You have to tackle entitlements. That's half of the budget. You have to tackle military and domestic. But if you attack only domestic and you freeze it at certain levels, it's not enough. It just simply mathematically is not enough to balance the budget. And there's a disconnect between Republicans who want a balanced budget but aren't maybe yet brave enough to talk about the cuts that have to come with it. Yeah, you have to. And I think that's a big debate that has to go on within our different Republican groups, the House and the Senate. But I don't think the willpower is there yet to talk about it. But I think politically it's a mistake, too. I think I can win, if I run in 6 years again for Senate, I can win bigger by being honest and being forthright and saying, here are the cuts. We may not like them all, but the alternative is bankruptcy for our country.
All right, Senator Paul, thanks a lot for taking a ride on the Subway Series with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hopefully I didn't say anything that will hurt me too bad, right?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.